September the 3rd, 2025. Let's gather together and experience the goodness of God. I'm Pastor Trey Comstock. We'll begin with our scripture of the week, Luke chapter 14, verses 25 through 33. And then Pastor Emily Larson and I will talk scripture, and more specifically how, okay, so maybe what you're about to hear is some hyperbole, but the point behind the hyperbole of the intensity with which we should hold our relationship with God remains. But first, a reading from Luke chapter 14, verses 25 through 33. Now the crowds were traveling with him, and he turned and said to them, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build and was not able to finish.' Or, what king, going out to wage war against another king, will not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If he cannot, then while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions." Okay, so this is just a lot, and this is the series that we've talked about, Dietrich Bonhoeffer and John Wesley, and that was like one of the things in the first sermon in this series. I used them as frames of hey, the whole concept of the series comes out of the fact that these are the two guys that kind of live rent free in my head. And this is, the headings, which are added by later scholars, but the headings for this section is literally called The Cost of Discipleship. And this is a lot. This is clearly, I think, and there's enough biblical scholars out there that will agree with me, this is a little hyperbole.
Yes, this is not, Jesus says, he who doesn't hate his life cannot be my disciple. He's not telling you to sign a suicide pact.
Right.
This is not literal. This is hyperbole. But it is a literal call to give more and to take seriously this call to discipleship, to recognize the cost that there is in following Christ.
Well, and it is part of the hyperbole is, okay, don't literally hate those things.
Right.
But it is understanding, a lot of this series is about kind of two specific concepts. One, what sits as our core allegiance. Two, given what sits at our core allegiance, how should this be impacting the way in which we actually live our lives, the way we actually treat people, the decisions we actually make? And so this is one that sits at the what comes before all of these other things that are definitely important, that the Bible will often tell you are definitely important.
They're in the 10 Commandments, right?
Right.
Honor your father and mother. It's in there.
Right.
Don't hate them.
There's plenty about, writers before Jesus himself, later writers will talk about the importance of marriage.
Right.
There's plenty about caring and raising up young people. This is not literally become hateful. This is hyperbole. Right. But at the base of this hyperbole gets at this question that I think we're really bad at answering, which is how do we put our connection to God as our core motivation, our discipleship, our willingness to follow God as the thing that we value the most, the thing that motivates us first.
Yes.
God often then calls us to be good parents, good spouses, good sons and daughters, good children, right? Yes, but the core of that, those things grow out, are one of the things that grow out of what is meant to be the first thing, which is the first thing, the first principle, the thing that's meant to sit at the core of our being and the core of our motivation for all we do, is our connection to God.
Right. Is this cost of discipleship? And this is one of those where you can really listen to Dietrich Bonhoeffer, because he didn't just say it. He didn't just write it. He lived it.
He lived it.
He lived it.
It
So
sucks.
listen up.
I've said this before, like, it's awful. Like, it was awful for him. And in some ways, it's rough for us because, both Jesus and Bonhoeffer, one to obviously Jesus is God to a much greater degree, but like they both then like do this thing.
They do the thing and die for the thing. Yes.
That they inform us as the like core of our faith. And then they go and do it. And so now they have not only good words that do seem theologically consistent, then they have the moral audacity to be morally consistent.
Yep. Well, and it was Bonhoeffer's realization of that cost of grace, that we have a costly grace, right? We don't have a cheap grace. We have a costly grace. We have grace that was bought with the price of Jesus's blood. And so to take that seriously and then to live accordingly because of that, that your discipleship should cost you something.
Well, and the conclusion he reached wasn't like, I should go to church more.
No.
It was like, I need to go fight the Nazis.
Right.
Like, I need in increasingly, in increasingly dangerous ways. But, because Cause of Discipleship gets written fairly early in the Dietrich Bonhoeffer v. Nazis period. Ethics is the thing that gets written later.
Right.
But already in Cause of Discipleship and Life Together, already we're talking about like a quasi-legal seminary where we're standing up to Nazi control of the churches that he had, this is the period. So if maybe I have my Bonhoeffer timeline wrong, but in my mind, this is kind of pre-Abwehr, like, I'm going to go spy. I'm going to go be a double agent.
Right.
But this is post, like, this is around the same period where, like, could have stayed at Columbia, could have stayed in the United States, had an opportunity to stay in Britain.
Right.
Takes none of it. Instead, like, goes back. This is the time period where, like, he not only is deeply disagrees with the Reichskirchen, the German church. He is helping lead a rebel seminary. He is still being public, in this, like, in a world with a Gestapo and an SS, he is being public about his, disagreements with the Hitler regime, which the Nazis. And so already, like, the Cause of Discipleship becomes this, like, interestingly prophetic work, because where it goes is
being put into action.
It's being
costly.
It's becoming increasingly costly. It's already getting costly at the point in which, these works come about, because he could have, like, done what Karl Barth did, right? Set up in a place and be an outward critic of the Nazis, and obviously a very eloquent critic of the Nazis.
Yes.
As
from
a German
safe
living
distance.
At a distance, as a German living in exile, he had options to be a German living in exile, and instead he is in the fray in Germany.
Yes.
Never flees.
Yes.
Even I watched this Bonhoeffer play that 80 players here in Houston put on. It was surprisingly good. Way better than the movie.
Yeah.
Because Bonhoeffer,
that bar's not very high, but
right.
Yes.
But so a better portrayal of Bonhoeffer than that movie.
Oh, good.
Because while we still just want to turn Bonhoeffer into the nonstop speech making machine, that everything he said was just the most profound speech you've ever heard. Like, that's what we want Dietrich to always be. And, like, I just can't anyways.
I can't picture him like that because nobody lives like that. But
Right.
his writing, though, was that
his
way.
writing, but like we no fiction, historical fictional portrayal of Bonhoeffer I've ever seen has figured out how to make Bonhoeffer talk like a person. They only know how to make him sound like his books. Like his books are amazingly well written, but like, no one talks like that. I don't talk the way that like my long form writing is. And I even work to make my long form writing sound like me, and I still don't sound like I do when I talk out loud. Anyways, but one of the things, like both the movie and the play present that like opportunity where he had to escape from prison,
and he chose not to.
He chose not to, right? Like he does the thing. He does this. Like if you want to look at a life that is not Jesus, obviously Jesus does this, but you can then be, you could then say, well, that's Jesus. Of course,
Jesus. But yes, also.
And Dietrich Bonhoeffer is not the only. He just happens to be a person who wrote a book called The Cost of Discipleship, and someone that in my kind of journey into seminary is someone I became really attached to. And then in my time at seminary, because that concept of costly grace really unlocked something for me about between that and another person we talk about often, Charles Taylor, who was someone I encountered later in seminary. These between Bonhoeffer and Taylor really unlocked like one of the pieces that is often missing in the way we approach our faith lives.
Yes.
Which is understanding our discipleship, our relationship with God as our first motivation, as the thing that sits at the most core of our being.
Yes.
Charles Taylor assaults this with this lovely description of modern secular life, which is something, again, talked about before, which is the idea of functional polytheism.
Right.
That the way most people live, and probably you and I included to a certain extent, because this is just functionally how we live our lives. As we functionally live our lives, that there are just many lowercase g gods, of which our relationship with God is one of those things.
Yes.
And so like we follow God, but our relationship with God is like maybe equal to, well, we need to focus on our jobs and like succeeding in capitalism. And is equal to like, and our family is really important,
right? And all the activities that surround that,
and there's probably hunting labubus is probably like for some
the labubu
folks,
craze.
It's amazing. It's just
insane.
It's just astounding. They are these
ugly.
Crazy gremlin creatures. Anyways, hunting for labubus, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, like it's just all of these. But like functionally, the way this is Charles Taylor writing after Bonhoeffer, but in a similar milieu, looking at the secular world and saying, okay, how we end up living our lives is we have the God part of our lives, but that doesn't really touch the financial part of our lives. And that doesn't really touch the career part of our lives. And that might not touch the like family part of our lives. And that certainly doesn't touch the labubu seeking part of our lives. and that is essentially meaning like we wouldn't call them gods. He's making a point.
Right.
But those things are of equal weight to our relationship with God.
But unless you live in a monastery or you are a cloistered nun, how do you make Christ the center of all of those aspects and areas of your life?
That's the point
how do you make God your motivation? Yes, exactly.
Like he is Charles Taylor, and Bonhoeffer isn't really saying this either, but Charles Taylor certainly isn't saying this.
Right.
Of like, quit your job, ignore your children.
Sell all your belongings, go join a monastery.
Become destitute and homeless. That is not what Charles Taylor is saying, and what Bonhoeffer is saying too, in his own way, in his highly intense way, is God is first. And then God, our relationship with God informs what we do with all of those things. And that also gets at that thing that, like, no one from the outside looking in can measure that.
Right.
This is about really reflecting
on your internal motivation.
What's your motivation? What is driving your actions? Why are you doing the things you're doing? Because I think for most people, right, like they're living, like, they're probably living
normal lives.
Good lives.
Pretty normal lives.
And, like, you know, going to work and being like a good worker, earning for their families, coming home, trying their best to care for their children, right? Or you know, they're older, like, you know, be a part of shaping their grandchildren, like,
right.
And so this is, again, this is the hyperbole.
So how do you make Christ the middle of that motivation for doing all of those things? Right. It always reminds me of the book A Year of Small Things. Did I ever told you about this one? Yeah.
No.
So where Sarah and Tom Arthur were two people who had done urban ministry and had lived this really radical faith life, where faith was very much the center and their onus of everything, because they were in an urban life and it just had to be the way it worked out. But then they got appointed to a suburban church. And so all of a sudden they were like, how do we make God the center of our decision making about the dandelions in our front yard? Because all of our neighbors are saying we have to spray, you know, pesticide, but that's not a thing that we believe God's calling us to. So they get with their neighbors and a group of people and do a small group of A Year of Small Things. You know, how are we going to honor God with our finances? Yeah. And they, you know, share their finances and realize that finances are, and your spending decisions are spiritual decisions. How are you honoring God with your marriage? How are you honoring God with going to work, raising your children? Each of those aspects of their lives. And they just took a year to really dive deep and examine, is the central motivation of my life God in each of these specific areas? Because this should be the motivation from which all of our actions stem, not just our faith life. Our faith life should be our life.
Right. That there is no
separation.
There is no separation. And one of the and again, this is how we talk about it. We don't get here out of some, like, pervasive evil, right? We get here in part because
of life. It's just life.
It's just life.
It just happens.
And the needs of paying the mortgage, paying rent, paying property tax, getting the kids to soccer practice, you know, arguing, you know, trying to secure good education, getting our kids into college, like all of these, you know, or you know, or if you're, you know, a little more on the working class side of the economic spectrum, just like, how do we make rent? How do we, like, you know, what bills are we going to pay versus not going to pay? Like, that can all, because it is urgent, that can feel like way more urgent than your connection to God. To which I say, fair.
Yes.
Right? Because, and some of that should mean that we're all taking better care of each other so that we're better able to see the spiritual things.
Yes.
Because some of that is, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It can be really difficult. It can be really easy to just get sucked into the exigencies of life and see that as, look, my primary existence is to deal with these exigencies. And when I have time for something else, I'll deal with something else.
Right.
Fair. Not what we're supposed to be doing, but fair that we feel this way.
Right.
Because the exigencies don't go anywhere.
Right. Because the bill collectors call and, you know, you have to pay your mortgage. All of those things happen. But and you see this also in a lot of motivational speakers now. If you've ever been to a motivational speaker or a life coach or whatever, they call it start with your why.
Yep, sure.
Right?
Yes.
That would be the phrase, is start with your why. What's your motivation? That's what will help you find your passion and live and be successful in life. Well, our passion that helps us to be successful in our faith life should be this cost of discipleship, should be this gift of grace that we have been given. And the recognition of that should motivate us then to go and live differently. Or for our why to be the reason that we do the things we do. It should make us passionate about our faith life, right? Which should just be our life.
Our life.
Our whole life.
That the core why is, I want to honor God.
Yes.
I want to be a disciple of God. I want to, follow in the example of Christ. I want to live a life transformed by this love and grace that I have found. And then that informs and drives our passion for the people and things that God calls on us to do and love and live. And it will still mean that we are providing, God is calling us to provide for our families.
Right.
Like that is like,
you still got to pay your mortgage.
Like those, like this is like neither Jesus nor Dietrich Bonhoeffer were monks.
Right.
Right. They had families. Dietrich Bonhoeffer does things specifically to protect his family. Jesus, hanging on the cross, does something to protect his mother.
To take care of his mother.
Both of these guys, we see them deal with the exigencies of life, deal with, how do we take care of the people that we are responsible to. Like, I think that's part of what I love about Jesus, but also like about Bonhoeffer, is they are not monks in an abbey.
Right. They live real life.
They both, live in a real world. It's like, in a way that like John Wesley really doesn't. John Wesley is a monk on a horse. He was married at one point, but like, he's a monk on a
he
horse.
was a circuit rider. It's a little different.
So John, a little less, but even John works hard to take care of his mother. Right. But like, he is a little less associated with the exigencies of life. Yeah. But it's not. This is not this like wholesale rejection of. No, man, this is not, we are not calling you, we're not forming a hippie commune. That's not I don't think that's the advice here.
And unless you're called to do that, by all means, but for the majority of us, a hippie commune is not the thing. But the thing that like Bonhoeffer preaches against the opposite of this, right? Yeah. He warns of the dangers of not living this way. So he claimed that, so this is one of my favorite Bonhoeffer quotes from Cost of Discipleship. It says, cheap grace is the preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance. Baptism without church discipline. Communion without confession. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship. Grace without the cross. Grace without Jesus Christ living and incarnate. Yep. And so I don't want my faith life to become that way, right? I don't want my faith to become without substance because I have not recognized and fully realized that my motivation and my onus should be this cost of discipleship, which then leads you to live a life differently.
Well, and we've talked about, this is kind of gets at that other angle of costly grace, of the cost of discipleship, is understanding what grace is for.
Yes.
And really, and this is a paraphrase of what Bonhoeffer is saying, but like really what grace is for is how hard it is to put God at the center.
Yes.
And the ways that we are not going to get that right.
Right. That we cannot do that on our own.
That we can't do that on our own. And that's in, to lean into some Wesley sanctification talk, like that this is a process of moving God to the center of our lives. And there are going to be things that we just don't do right. I mean, like, I didn't, it worked out, but I didn't, when I was going into college, right. I was already a Christian. we're about to do a podcast about season 2 of Shiny Happy People that will really deal with the kinds of Christians that both of us
we were
at the time. And so I was a Christian, but I didn't talk to God about that, about where I was going to go to school and what I was going to major in, and like none of that. Like
Right.
it didn't occur to me that this is something that I should be in conversation with God about, and that's like a major decision.
Right.
And so like, I have been on a journey, since that moment at 19. I don't want to sit here and like oversell the like crazy sinner that I was. I'm not trying to get on the evangelical speaking circuit. And so I don't want to like oversell it. Like I was not some horrific whatever, but I was certainly a person who would claim to be Christian. I was certainly a person who would say that my faith really mattered to me. And I also had no concept of talking to God about these like big things I was doing in my life, that God was not certainly at that moment at 19. I had a relationship with God. God was not at the center of my decision-making matrix. God was not at the center of my life. God was not at the center of my motivation. And if, the journey I've been on since 19 to 39, that's 20e years.
That's 20 years.
I don't like that.
You're almost 40.
You're almost 40.
That is true.
That is true.
I'll get there first.
You are more almost 40 than I am. When I turn 40, this joke will stop being funny. I don't love this. Anyways, but like the journey of the past 20 years of my life has been a journey of like, how do I, become alive to what it means to have God at the center of what I'm doing. And, I've had kind of major steps along that road. But that's what grace is really for, is to help us along that process. Grace is not meant to be the like, hey, oops.
It's okay if I screw up again.
It's okay.
Oh, well.
Because like, and it is okay that you screw up again, and you will be forgiven. But we're not meant to treat this like just like, oh, I don't really need to change. I'm just going to
whitewash all this and keep it going. Yeah,
right. Because that's at some point that is just like, that is just abusing God's good gift. Right. Is the point that Bonhoeffer is making.
This is not true life change coming out of this love of Christ, because Christ first loved us.
And to loop Wesley back in, God is helping you do all of this. We're not alone. This is not just like get good.
You just gotta white knuckle it and get better at this whole faith thing, because
and it's gonna be 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and that is what grace is for.
Yes.
And like a healthy way to approach the grace of God is to say, I do not yet live a life where God is fully at the center of what I'm doing. I need God's help to get there. In this process, I still will not get everything right. And that is okay, because God forgives me. How we often treat grace is to say, it's fine.
It's fine.
We
it's covered. It's fine.
It's covered. It's fine. It doesn't really matter what we do.
The bill's been paid. I'll keep running up the credit card.
Right.
Like that's not how this works.
and God's not gonna like, we're not switching theological schools here. Like God will keep loving you.
Yes.
But at some point, are we just like abusing that relationship?
Right.
And God has said from the beginning of time that God's not giving up on us, even if we are currently treating God's grace that way. That grace is still there. That grace is still there. We are, you can talk about growing without talking about works righteousness or talking about a God that publicly hates you. Right. This is still not sinners in the hands of an angry God.
Right. Or the billboard downtown, does God hate you? Still up. It's very large. I have to drive by it pretty often.
That's wild. Does God hate you? Maybe I should make so I do like subtitles for these episodes. I should just like does God hate you? If we were better, No, if we were better at YouTube, that is exactly what the title of this episode would be. And it would be
Right.
us making this
Clickbait.
face.
Hello, clickbait. Yeah.
Hello, clickbait. Unfortunately, it works. No, God doesn't hate you. God
No.
never has. God
No.
never will.
No.
Even if we are mistreating God's grace,
Yes.
that grace is still there.
Yes.
But this gets to we're supposed to love God and follow God.
Yes.
And abusing God's grace, while a viable strategy to maintain a relationship with God, because God is just like that, is not really what it looks like to love somebody.
Not really a healthy relationship. Not a healthy marriage.
Not a healthy anything.
Yeah.
Right? I am certainly not a perfect husband. But I am better today than I was 16 years ago when I got married. And my wife is a very patient person. And maybe she would have tolerated a lot more of my rough edges for a lot longer. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I felt motivated out of, the joy of this relationship to, over time, grow and change and be a better husband and be a better person in this relationship. And this is, I think of, there are people in my life, I won't name names because this gets really personal, but there are people in my life whose spouses I don't like. I don't like their spouses.
Yeah.
I just don't get along with them. And I'm probably never going to.
Mm-hmm.
But that person is clearly motivated by that relationship to become a better person.
Yes.
And I go, great. I will tolerate this person who I don't like and who I do not think likes me, because this person I care about is a better human being because
of the relationship.
Of that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we can look around and have smaller scale models of what this might look like.
Right.
And then we apply that to our relationship with God, and understanding that part of that, growing and changing and becoming the person that God wants us to be, involves us
growing
putting
and
God growing over time to put God at our relationship with God, our discipleship, at the center of who we are, at the very top of the decision-making matrix, that our relationship with God then shapes everything else we do with our lives.
Yes.
And we have plenty of examples, Jesus being the lead example. There was a line in the Hebrews text that Jesus is the pioneer and perfecter of our faith.
Yes.
In the Hebrews 11 and 12 text. I think that's in the Hebrews 12 side. Anyway, that when we did Hebrews 11, 29 through 12, 2. The Great Cloud of Witnesses text that we did a few weeks back. There was that line, Jesus is the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. Yes. Part of Jesus as the pioneer is Jesus did this first.
Jesus did it for us.
For us. And set the example
that we are then to follow.
Coming down, and then this is Jesus being motivated out of love for God, and love for us, comes down from heaven, deals with the indignities of human life, walks, talks, teaches, deals with constant betrayal and disappointment, allows himself to get murdered by the Romans at the behest of the temple, as a way to show what it means to live into a life where love of God and love of neighbor sits at the very core of your decision-making matrix, because that's what sat at the very core of Jesus' decision-making matrix as the example to us.
Yes.
If you have thoughts on this, Bonhoeffer facts we don't know, email us, thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. That is thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. We are the Divine Provisions Co., and we need your help. Like, comment, subscribe, leave us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcast, share something we made that you found meaningful. All that helps us go further, and in that way helps us be more sustainable. If you would like to be financially involved in the work that we do, you can go to divineprovisions.co and click the donate button. If you want more of what we do a lot, and we always got more coming down the pike. You can follow us. It's at Divine Provisions Co. on all the places: Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and divineprovisions.co on the internet. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. We'll see you next time.